Hi, I'm Bob Beckett, and I'm running for school board trustee.
The provincial funding model is based on current student enrollment, not projected numbers. With the rapid rate of growth in SD62, many children are not going to their local school, and many are in portables due to schools being over capacity. What will you do to ensure that spaces are available for every student in the district as enrollment numbers continue to climb and spaces remain stagnant?
I think the first thing to do is to take a look at the problem, the big picture from 10,000 feet. How did we get here? Why does the problem exist? Over the years, there has been lots of students, lots of schools where the enrollment has dropped, especially in the mainland, and ministries were struggling, as were district school boards, struggling with what to do with these empty classrooms, the consolidated schools, and it was very, very difficult. Yet here, in one of the fastest growing communities and regions in British Columbia, that's not been the case. And I think the ministry struggled with how to deal with increased enrollment. And at one time, my understanding was that the ministry only provided funding for existing enrollment and not for anticipated enrollment. So I think it's to understand how we got to this situation, and then moving forward, demonstrate the business case, the financial business case, where you can sell the ministry on the fact that it doesn't make sense to build a school only to end up with portables on the property, especially given the fact that when you try to add on to a school after it's been built, it's going to be far more costly. So create that business case where it is financially more viable to address the anticipated growth. And it's easy to tell what the growth is based on the relationship and working with your local municipalities, your building department, your planning department. They know what the student enrollments are going to be given the growth. And then last but not least, create that relationship with the ministry and those involved in identifying school enrollments so that will allow for rational decision making.
PACs in our district often fundraise for necessary school equipment such as playgrounds, books, emergency supplies, field trips, and technology. How do you feel about parents covering these necessary costs, and what will you do to ensure that education is funded properly in our district?
Well, I'm going to start individually with each of the items that were mentioned in the question. Let's start with playgrounds. I don't think parents, schools should be responsible for playgrounds. We should be looking at partnering with other municipalities, daycare centers, etc. Playgrounds should be a community asset. Playgrounds should be designed around getting our children outside instead of on electronics. And as I said, they should be considered a community asset as opposed to a school asset. Emergency supplies, clearly in my mind, that should be a ministry responsibility. Emergency supplies need to be standardized for the entire province, including appropriate storage facilities for these supplies. This hit and miss approach is not acceptable. Given the risks in our communities, whether it's wildland interface fires, whether it's earthquakes, our students, our children, may have to be housed for an indefinite period of time. And that means there needs to be water, there needs to be bedding, there needs to be food for these children until such times as parents or first responders can assist in the evacuation of the schools. Field trips. Field trips are a very, I think, valuable teaching tool, but education is not just about academics. I'd like to see a sharing formula as well as coming up with policy and guidelines that ensure field trips are more affordable, making them more inclusive for all children. And technology, I'm not sure exactly what technology we are referring to in this question, but if the curriculum includes the need for technology, then that should be the responsibility of the municipality.
To new candidates, where do you see the biggest change that needs to happen?
I'm sorry, what was that one?
To new candidates, where do you see the biggest change that needs to happen? The first part was to incumbents, but
Oh, okay. Can you give me 1 second for this one?
sure. To new candidates, where do you see the biggest change that needs to happen?
I think it is addressing the growth, and again, whether it's addressing physical facilities, new schools, updating old schools, or human resources, providing adequate staffing, providing adequate teaching, keeping up with the demands associated with higher enrollment in our school system is absolutely critical, and that's going to be the number one challenge for our community.
Currently, the Belmont zone, the Westshore, elects 4 of the 7 available trustee seats, and the Mills Landing zone, Sooke, elects 3 trustee seats. Given the changing demographics of our district and the reorganization into families of schools, would you support a change in the allocation of trustee seats for future elections?
Well, not being an existing trustee, I'm not completely familiar with the arrangements that have been in place for many, many years. I think that I would advocate for a very comprehensive consultation process involving all the partners, including teachers, QP, parents, and the community. I think with that approach, we could again take a look at this issue and perhaps address it to the satisfaction of all of us in the community.
With the new curriculum, we are seeing a brand new model for reporting. What are your beliefs about how a child's educational success is measured, and how do you see the transition into post-secondary working with this new method of assessment?
I like the model. I like the assessment. I've said many times that from an education perspective, we should not simply be basing our successes on academics. Having our children take some of their own responsibility in their self-evaluation allows them to focus on their strengths and weaknesses. This approach, recognizing the teacher still has a role to play in evaluating the student, especially as they get ready to enter the workforce or go on to post-secondary education, is more in line with the real world. So I think it's a good approach to having both the student, the parents, and the teacher involved in assessing one's strengths and weaknesses.